So why do I think this documentary is important? Well, I originally thought it was important because I knew that people above the poverty line realized that it could be difficult, or at least a lot of them did, but I don't really think they realized how difficult it could be. And I mostly realized how difficult it could be myself because, you know, I'm in a pretty good place right now. I work at a call center, but I have the luxury of living at home. And I know that a lot of people don't have that luxury. And I know that when I was living on my own, I had to move back home because I couldn't afford living on my own. You know, my roommate decided to move out, and I had a choice. I could either try and force myself into debt by staying there, or I could move back home myself. And I started thinking, you know, I could have done it technically, but it would have been really, really, really difficult. Like, and I'm thinking, like, all these things that come up in everyday life. You're like, your car breaks down, or you have to, you know, you're all these maintenance things. And a big part of that decision was, if any of these things happened when I was living on my own, I wouldn't be able to afford it. And so, you know, I've been living at home again for the last year and a bit, fortunately, and I've had the opportunity to get comfortable, which is, you know, it's a nice thing, but I think that it's kind of made me almost forget what living on my own was like in terms of finances and stuff. So I realized how difficult it could be when I was talking to my friend at the call center, and she admitted that she had to go to the food bank recently. And I sat there and I was like, holy crap, you know, you work at the same job as me, you work more than me, and you had to go to a food bank. And that kind of opened my eyes to realize, hang on a second, there's a real problem here. Minimum wage is not a living wage. You cannot do it on your own. And that got me thinking, what about people on welfare? What about people on on assistance? And so I thought it was really important to make this documentary kind of as a expose, I guess, to show people just how hard it can be. So I called up 4 or 5 people in different walks of life, and they agreed. The 5 people that I chose to interview for this documentary were Kati, Michelle, Lisa, Lindsay, and Dan. I thought Kati would be a good candidate because she's the only income in a 2-person apartment, and that even though she's making a little above minimum wage, she's still well underneath the poverty line, and I thought that would be good to show that kind of struggle. Even with a better income, it's still, if you're doing it on your own, you still can't really do it. What kinds of sacrifices have you had to make to adjust?
Well, we visit our parents a lot less than we'd like to. We don't go out and do things. Like, we don't go to restaurants and we don't go shopping. We just sort of exist in our own little world of work, sleep.
The cycle.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the stress of it?
Well, I kind of just accept it as what my life is. Nathan sort of lets it fester for a while, and then eventually he just starts an argument and then it explodes, but the cause is always, he feels as though he's letting me down somehow. Like, he feels the stress way more than I do.
What do you think the scariest thing is?
There's the $10 margin between making rent or not, and you're thinking about, like, you're digging for your quarters to try and, like, where am I going to get this $10 because you're so close? And, like, the holding your breath until rent clears, like, that's terrifying.
Is there a good thing about it, do you think?
You definitely appreciate little things more, like going to the grocery store and being able to pick out all the stuff that you want it's just like Christmas almost. Like going and being able to, like, get a frozen pizza or something, or a treat like that, where most people would, that's like their normal food, and for us it's this big treat. So I guess just appreciation.
Yeah, you don't take things for granted.
Yeah, not at all. You can't.
What would you do if you won the lottery?
I'd pay off my student loan, and I'd buy my mother a house, and then probably sit on the rest.
Well, there you go. How did you get to this place?
This plane being...
Like, were you born into it, or was it something happened?
Well, I definitely grew up paycheck to paycheck. At the time, I wasn't really aware of, like, to me that was just life. And so growing up and getting into this point now where I'm almost better off than my parents were, I don't feel the stress just because this is just the way my life has always been. It's always been paycheck to paycheck. And as long as you can get all of your bills paid down to zero, like, you're living the dream. So you think it's not really something you had to adjust to as much as, say, somebody else? As Nathan, no. Nathan grew up with a family who worked really hard to get to they were, but they're still better off than even most people, I think. So for him, this sort of not being able to get whatever you want or having to think about like food over internet, it hadn't been in his thought process before we moved out on our own. So for me, it was really easy. It was just something that has always been my thing. And for Nathan, it's the source of huge stress. I remember too living in Antigonish, and in Antigonish we are way more impoverished than we are here. Like here, I feel like we're almost rich just because we do pay our bills down to zero, and we've never been late for rent. And in Antigonish, there was times where we were living strictly off of my student loan, which are not exactly made to live off of. They're made to help you get through school. Yeah. And we went to the food bank. That's how we fed ourselves whenever we were in Antigonish. And I remember like just pretending that, or just getting to the point where you just pretended that was normal. Like, oh, everybody goes to the food bank. And I remember when my parents found out, it destroyed them emotionally. They were so upset. But of course, they're paycheck to paycheck too, so there was nothing that they could have done.
Yeah.
But
must have been hard for them.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially my father, felt like he doomed me to this life because of him growing up and how he, like, Mom tried so hard to save money for us, but it always got spent on something, whether the car broke or
things just get in the way and you can't really save. And do you feel like you can kind of save now? Or is
every time I get close, I'll get like $200, but then if I don't work overtime, I'll need that $200 just to keep everything down on zero. So I'm not quite to that point yet, but that's why Nathan's new plan right now is to try to get us to the point where we can save. Because it's just not an option right now.
And so you kind of have to take that overtime.
Yeah, to make ends meet.
Yeah, and that's going to be really hard on your mind and on your body too.
Yeah, well, I don't really notice it. To me, just making ends meet is the ultimate victory.
There you go. Michelle, I thought, would be a good candidate because not everyone is able to work. And where Michelle has been in both points of working and not working, and even making above the poverty line, and then having to go back and adjust to not being able to work, I thought she'd have a very clear understanding of what it would take. So. What kinds of sacrifices have you had to make to adjust to living under the poverty line?
Well, it's not my first time. I was born that way. And I was that way again when I was a single mom. But yeah, considering 4 or 5 years ago, I made just under $40,000 a year. It's a pretty big change. Financial, they're basically financial. Also, socialization. I mean, you don't have money to get around, and there's that embarrassment factor. You don't want to tell your friends that, nah, I really can't come out right now because I don't have money. It's one time a month.
So mostly financial?
Mostly financial and social. I mean, I never had hobbies to begin with. So.
Singing?
Well, yeah, but that's free. That's free.
Yeah. What would you do when you won the lottery?
I would buy myself a small, normal house and a fuel-efficient car and put a little money away, and then I would help whoever I could, pretty much. Anybody who needed it. I know a lot of people say that. I also know me. Probably start a charity, really. So.
What did the charity go for?
That would be my hardest decision, to be honest. I'm a single mom, so, and I believe strongly in education, so probably I would go that route.
Or a mix between the two?
Or exactly.
Perfect.
It's hard to say. I have a lot of causes.
Yeah. How do you deal with the stress of it?
Well, I'm on a fixed income because of my inability to deal with stress. So, because I had a breakdown. So, I'm not very well. I'm getting better. Exercise is a positive thing. You know, I try and walk it off. Don't live in the best neighborhood anymore though, so, and I'm a night owl, so sometimes I can't. I deal with stress kind of negatively, unfortunately. I tend to internalize it. There's a lot of guilt. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
We're getting help.
Is there a good thing, maybe, you think, about living under the poverty?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's just, you learn to appreciate everything so much more. You see things with the clarity, you see the waste that goes on in today's society, and it's kind of disgusting. Well, somewhat, not kind of, it's definitely disgusting. And I already was that kind of person that was not about consumerism, commercialism. So this latest jaunt back to poverty has been angering, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. So you said you grew up like this, but you didn't stay like that.
Oh no, back and forth, back and forth. We're a family of bad luck circumstances, and which I consider to be a blessing.
Because out of every negative you can see a positive.
I have to, yeah. You have to see a positive. And there's no such thing as, you know, a bad mistake, in my opinion. Mistakes is where your learning comes from, and it is why I am wise beyond my years, or as I've been told many times.
All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa I actually met at the call center, and being in both places, again, she's had to realize what it takes to adjust and what it takes to survive. And she's been in both places, and I thought that would be really interesting to capture because she has a very interesting story. So she's had a very interesting journey to share. So, living like this, you know, under the poverty line, what kind of sacrifices have you had to make to adjust?
I don't have any savings, for starters, but then I suppose not a lot of people do in all income brackets. You don't have the same peace of mind that you do when you're financially secure. You don't have that extra time to pursue maybe all the things you'd like to do. More of your waking thoughts and energies are focused on the necessities, or even just, you know, thinking about them or worrying about them. So it's a little bit of a drain of energy in that sense.
Yeah. Well, okay. So how do you deal with that stress?
Sometimes you indulge in it. You let it get the upper hand. I personally am of the theory that, and it's a good kind of therapeutic measure to allow yourself to have that feeling for a while, but to limit it. So you can't let it go on and on and on, day in, day out, because it takes its toll on you. You have to distract yourself from that. So being productive is a big thing, but also having leisure time and making sure, allowing yourself time to be mindful too, and not to literally just be grateful, like to truly refocus on what's good. You know, hey, I do have shelter. Hey, I do have, you know, some crackers for dinner. Hey, you know, seriously, you know, hey, wow, the sky looks really awesome today. Hey, I smiled at somebody on the bus, you know.
You're not letting it get a hold of you, but it's important to recognize that.
No, you have to remain in control of yourself in the situation, no matter what.
What do you think the scariest thing is?
Probably that, losing control, like having somebody else.
In control of whether you have shelter or not?
Yeah, but also your feelings too, or your thoughts. Yeah, having control of your physical surroundings is huge, but allowing somebody else to have say over your existence, it almost becomes then like a fear of almost like going to jail. Like, am I gonna be living outside, exposed to everything? Am I gonna be living in a shelter where everything's restrictive? You know, for some people, not really for me, but for some people it might be, hey, am I gonna have to go live with someone I don't really want to live with? Just you know, save money. You know, the things that people do in these situations.
Do you think that there's a good thing about it?
Yeah, it teaches you a lot about resilience, that's for sure. And it teaches you to be really grateful for small things where you can, I mean, I've been in all levels of the circumstance. I've had times in my life when I've had a lot of money. I've had times when I've had decent amounts of money. I've had times like now where I have very little money, you know, so I can, maybe unlike perhaps a lot of people, I can relate to each one of those things. And I can honestly say there were times when I had a lot of money that I was a lot more stressed than I am right now, which is interesting. An interesting thing and totally true. But it is also true when you do have a lot of financial security, you can take a lot of things for granted. Like, I don't know, say in your purchasing choices, you'll go and you'll spend a lot of money on something without being too mindful of, do I really need this? Is it wasteful? You know, is it the right thing? Whereas you become very, very practical when you have to budget. Usually. I did buy a donair for dinner last night. That was excessive. I duly punished myself for it. But hey, I wanted that donair, so.
You gotta treat yourself sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You can't, if you know, some people, you know, certain people I know claim they can, you know, live on next to nothing. But of course, you need to have something you enjoy. If you have nothing you enjoy, whether you're, you know, financially low or high, if you're in that state of apathy or even anhedonia or whatever, that's the most dangerous place to be in
life. Did you always grow up like this, or did something happen to take you below the poverty line?
No. I mean, I had two parents who worked, and, you know, they both had pretty good jobs, and they were both, you know, not people who like to spend a lot of money either, so we were also always very secure. We always had our own home, we always had a car, we always took vacations in the summer. We could buy whatever we liked. We didn't necessarily, but yeah, there was no...
The option was there, it wasn't restrictive.
There was no worries at all in my upbringing, and most of my life, yeah.
And then things changed?
So that doesn't prepare you for this.
No, it wouldn't.
No, because even though I'm not prejudiced, and it's not one of those things, and you can always say, hey, wow, it's hard for people, and you know that it is. I never look down on people. It's not the same as actually being in that circumstance yourself. It's always like, hey, wow, it's hard for people, and that sucks, and blah, 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 but it's still something that happens to other people.
It's not something that's going to happen to me, it's something that's going to happen to other people.
No, and that's just a reality for most people. The majority of people are middle class, I believe, or at least lower working class. So most people, even though maybe they think they're in trouble, they're not really. You know, it's really taught me you can do with a lot less than you ever think you can. Yeah, and I still, even now, I'm looking around and like, I have a lot of stuff. Really.
And I mean, if it came down to that point, you could undersell that stuff. But you could...
Yeah, and the way I grew up too, my parents, my mom especially, was kind of a hoarder. She had a lot of stuff, not necessarily valuable stuff, but just stuff in general. And we were brought up not to throw out or waste anything at all. That was perhaps one of the most sinful things. So, you know, that stays with you. And having to get rid of stuff, or then moving from having to get rid of it to even wanting to, was like a huge psychological thing. And it's actually kind of a freeing thing. You feel much better without clutter. I don't think I could ever live like a Calvin Klein ad, you know, like one mattress and one, you know, orchid in a vase kind of thing. But, well, you know what I mean. And there are people like that, but
Do you feel like
less
you have
is
to
better.
have some?
Yeah, I do. And memorabilia, of course, is a huge thing. Like, that's probably the biggest thing, because I found most other things you can replace. But memorabilia is not. But now that we live in the 21st century, in the digital age, I've been digitizing stuff more. I just take pictures of stuff and then get rid of the original.
There you go.
Because that's all you need, is the memory of it, the idea of it, more than the tangible thing.
Thank you.
And that was exciting.
Lindsay actually met through college. And I thought, you know, even being on student loans and trying to live and still trying to work, it doesn't work. And I thought she'd have a very good viewpoint from that standpoint. What kind of sacrifices have you had to make to adjust to living underneath the poverty line?
There have been several different times where, depending on how much money was coming in, like groceries, food, it's either pay your bills or eat vegetables. So when you can buy Mr. Noodles for 25 cents or a cucumber for $2.45, what are you gonna buy? Cutting corners, various places, say if you have credit, pulling money out of a credit card to pay the power bill has been interesting. Wouldn't recommend it, but sometimes it becomes necessary.
You gotta keep your lights on.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, how do you deal with the stress of it?
It can be quite stressful, but you make it work. You always make it work somehow. It's not exactly the best ideal situation, but it's possible, it's functional. It is what it is.
Do you sing
Yes.
to deal with the stress of it? Do you think that
Oh, yes, always, always. I'm constantly singing it. My neighbors probably want to kill me, but it's all good. Yeah, I sing, I write. Yeah, it helps,
you need that creative self-expression,
pretty much.
and that kind of takes your mind off of it.
Oh, definitely.
What do you think the scariest thing about it is?
The scariest thing about it is there's no wiggle room. So if anything major happens, say you end up needing to go to the hospital, you've lost several days of work, you can't pay your rent. You can't buy your groceries, you can't pay your power bill.
Yeah.
None of that happens. And that's terrifying. I remember one of the worst situations, again, because groceries were so tight, that I had where we had bread and cheese in the house, and that was about it. And the cheese went moldy, and I ended up crying over this stupid block of cheese because that was one of the two things we had to eat, and that's quite terrifying.
No, it is.
Yeah.
But you made it work.
Oh yeah, for sure. Many different ways to eat bread. Yeah.
Do you think there's a good thing about it?
Yeah. It teaches you how to be stronger, how to work, how to adapt, how to work with not much and make it last, make it stretch, make it go further. It shows you kind of what you need and what you want and the difference between the two. And how to work within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, What would you do if you won the lottery?
Let's see. I would pay off pretty much all of my debt, probably buy a small house, help a couple of my friends who are also in similar situations or have been, and probably just save the rest because I don't know what I would do with that kind of money, really. I can't justify spending ridiculous amounts of money on
Not after the experience.
frivolous things, but I'd have a house and be debt free, and I'd probably still work because I'd go stir crazy if I didn't.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you always grow up under the poverty line, or did something happen to take you from this?
No, I've pretty much grown up in it my whole entire life. I don't think there's ever been a time where I've ever lived, above it by a pretty substantial margin, which was pretty interesting to say the least. But I think it's made me a better person. I know that sounds strange, but again, you understand what's important.
You kind of learn to be more appreciative, would you say?
Definitely. Of even the smallest things. And that I would never, ever change.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan I actually met online, and I thought he'd be a good candidate because even now that he's out of it, he spent most of his life in it, and that has given him appreciation for both being out from underneath the poverty line and from being under the poverty line, and just some of the extents that you have to go to survive. What kind of sacrifices have you had to make to adjust?
Quite a few, actually. I mean, well, I can tell you the first sacrifice I made came when I was 18, and I went to university at Dalhousie. I did that for engineering, and I could only stay for 4 months, and I had to quit because student loans and I had gotten into many arguments about how much they think they should give me for a living cost, and how much I think they should give me for a living cost. And they seemed to think that for 4 months I could pay my rent and feed myself with $700. So I had to keep working, and in order to keep the bills flowing, I had to work as often as I possibly could, and I had to come to a point where I had to choose between one or the other, because I mean, I was spending all of my time at school or work, and at work I didn't have any time to work on schoolwork, so I had almost no time to work on schoolwork. So I guess the big first sacrifice I had to make in order to pay the bills was to give up school at the time. And I mean, you probably find that pretty common between a lot of people.
Yeah. How do you deal with the stress of it?
The stress of it? When I was younger, the way I dealt with the stress was pretty simple. I had found a way to put World of Warcraft into my life, I guess. I spent a lot of time doing that and just hanging out with my friends. Like whenever I wasn't at work, I tried to fill my life with every possible dream I could think of, any hobbies that I could think of, just to not think about it. And when I was at work, I tried everything not to think about it too. I mean, it always creeps in your head like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to not pay the power this month in order to pay for groceries, and then maybe they won't be so pissed off the month after when the late bill comes in.
Yeah. What do you think the scariest thing is about it?
About everything, or what's happened to me?
What's happened?
The scariest for me was years ago. I was living in an apartment with a lot of people, and they had all made plans to move away and didn't really tell me. And I had quit a job, Minix.
Yeah.
I'd quit Minix because it was going under, and it was looking like they weren't really going to give me much of any kind of package. And I was looking for opportunities. It was easier if I had my schedule open rather than working 60 hours a week there. And, you know, everybody else was like, we're all leaving. So I guess the scariest thing that happened to me was, how am I going to pay the rent with no job? And, I mean, above and beyond that, I guess the scariest thing is just thinking about, like, when I was young, like, 11 years or so ago now, I got a credit card. And my credit card still has almost the same amount on it that did 10 years ago, and I have not missed a payment. And it's just scary to think, like, how long is this going to take? Is it going to be forever?
Yeah. Do you think there's a good thing about it?
I think it teaches people how to be responsible. I think being below the poverty line reminds people that they have to live within their means, and that's not easy, and it can be hard. But it teaches people, I guess, three things: humility, whether you want it to be or not. It teaches you be smart with your money and be smart with everything you do. Make sure that, like, you have a plan for everything, every little thing in your life. You think of little things like, if the TV breaks, what are you going to do now? And I guess it teaches people friendship. You have to network yourself with other people and share what little you have, and that's really, it's great because it creates a community of poor people, but we're all poor, so we're not really better off. There's
no prejudice.
Yeah.
What would you do if you won the lottery?
And this that ties into the last question, I think, perfectly. If I won the lottery, and I mean, you'd probably find this from a lot of people who live below the poverty line in their lives, one of the first things I would do is pay off my debts and then go on a spending spree of paying off the debts of every person who ever helped me or I've ever felt bad for being in the situation. Those would probably be the very first things I do, above and beyond even like buying a house or traveling. First things I would do is set other people up so they don't have to live through this.
Did you always grow up like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. My dad left when we were young, and my mom contracted a disease that didn't allow her to walk for a long time. Took her a very long time to get out of the wheelchair and back to a certain slow amount of mobility, and she couldn't work because of it. So we were on disability, which was at the time, and people can argue this whatever they want. I mean, I was the one who looked at the mail. Was less than welfare at the time. So, yeah, exactly what I said. I think we made like 800 or 900 a month, and welfare people were getting like 1,000 or 1,100. Like, it was just slightly more, but she made it work. She always kept us fed. We always had television to watch. We went to school. We had clothes. I don't know how she did, because I can't make it work now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back then.
But yeah. Yeah, inflation and whatnot. But yeah, no, I guess I've lived with it off and on my whole life. Like, we've had opportunities where everybody's worked and we've had money coming in. We've lived in houses and duplexes, but I live in a flat now.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
No problem.
I wasn't really sure what I was looking for when I was making this documentary and what I expected to find. But what I found was that even simple things like going to Tim Hortons to get a coffee is one of the sacrifices that people have to make, because you can't afford to do that. Like, it's something that most people wouldn't think about. But when you're in those shoes and you have to make those kinds of sacrifices, you have to make them to survive. And I don't think I really expected that. But what I found out was that minimum wage is not a living wage. And I hope to see change in the future.